Good evening or good afternoon, depending where you are. I don't know if I can say good morning. I don't know if there's anybody from that part of the planet, but welcome to our session this evening, Healing Through Community. And we actually do this of a sort every week, every Tuesday, 7:30 Eastern, through a group called Cultivating Caring Communities. And Um, I was really wanted to do this tonight in Limicon because I wanted to kind of open up the possibility of having an ongoing community, an ongoing conversation that actually goes beyond Limicon. But at this point, I would really like to give everybody an opportunity to be a co-creator here. So I'm not going to be doing a presentation in the formal sense. I'm not going to be using PowerPoints, and I'm not going to be sticking to a program. But I do have certain thoughts and certain ideas that I hope will kind of lead us into different directions. And I hope that you will say the things that are on your mind that might lead us in completely different directions. So, um, I guess the first thing I want to start with is I want to talk about um, the very idea of healing through community, what that really means, what that really presents to us as a possibility. And I think one of the things that really, um, I think is the most important thing is creating a space where people can communicate. Because I think that's the fundamental principle of community is communication, oddly enough. And I think that as we communicate, we begin to develop a sense of who we are, and not only as individuals, but also as a group. So there's a collective that it kind of emerges out of this. Looks very organic, or it should be. If it becomes too formalized and too rigid, then I think it also has the danger of really suppressing the individual's point of view, which is very important. But we were just talking about a brave space, actually. Um, And that's an interesting concept. I mean, it was just came up to me in the last couple days, and Lena had just mentioned it. And the interpretation that I have is a place where people feel secure enough to be vulnerable. I don't know if that's really the best definition, but that's the one I found. And I think that's kind of interesting because what it says is that individuals have developed that sense of security, but what gives that to them? Is it something that develops in them internally, or is it something that comes about through the feelings of support that they get from the people around them? I think it's probably a little of both, really. Um, but I think the another element here is, of course, um, the importance of being heard and being validated. And these are words that I've heard like bandied about a lot, in a lot of uh, my interactions with people in different community spaces. But I think they're very important, and I think that really comes down to just being validated or being a sense again of just having people recognize your value as a person. And I think that the other thing is that we need to be able to reduce the shame that we often feel as a result of feeling that somehow we're unique in our suffering, that we're the only ones that are really going through this. And that when we find out that there's other people that are also going through suffering and trauma, I think it makes it a little easier. I guess it all goes back to that idea of misery loves company. I don't know. But I think that some of those fundamental ideas really are very important to address this idea of healing within this collective sense. Because I think one of the things that happens as a result of our lives being separate from each other, which we have in this society, we have this tendency to really feel that we need to go it alone and we need to act on our own. I think that definitely kind of blinds us to our mutual ideals and our mutual value. Again, we have to understand that when we're dealing with individual trauma, we're actually dealing with collective trauma at the same time because we're dealing with the suffering of the people around us. So, with some of those ideas in mind, um, even though it's a relatively small group, I would like to do a really quick breakout for people to share with one other person what their idea is in terms of how this process can take place before we go any further. Um, what does it mean to find healing in community? What is it about community that really gives us the opportunity to heal that we can't find outside of it? And is it often the case that the damage that takes place as a result of our being outside of community is actually the thing that's causing us to seek community and therefore find healing through it? In other words, are we just stopping the damage? Are we stopping the wounding that's going on by being in each other's presence? So there's some ideas that I'd kind of like you to consider, and I'd like you to take a quick opportunity here to do a breakout with one other person and discuss some of these things, and then we'll come back and see what some of your insights are as far as this is concerned. And the reason that I value breakouts is because I think they give people um, a safer feeling in terms of being able to talk to just one person and get their reactions instead of looking at a huge room. I know that when I've done public speaking, it can be very challenging because I find myself looking at all the different faces and trying to really get a sense of how what I'm saying is impacting everyone. So I think that the breakout rooms, the individual breakouts where we do one-on-one, I think they give us an opportunity to really focus on another person and what their feelings are in the situation we're in. And as a result of that, we get um, a better form of communication, a little more confidence out of that process. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to be setting this up right now. We don't have an even number, so looks like we might have a group of three in one case. But it's only going to be for 5 minutes,
Can I
and
be
then
in
we'll
the
come back.
group of three? Because
What's that?
I'm just listening, so you can just pop me in unless someone wants to ask me questions. If that's weird too,
What's
I
that?
don't know. Just listening, if people are weirded out by that, that's okay too. But
Well, they've got to get over that, don't they? They have to get over that
Well,
because
and and
that's part
that's
of
the
the
other
problem.
real quick, Roger. Is there space for those who may not feel like or have the bandwidth this evening to step into a breakout room to stay in the main room?
Um, well, I'll tell you what. There, I I could probably figure out a way to make sure that you don't go into a room if that's how you
I'm not
feel.
saying that that's my, I just, as I facilitate, I quite often run into people that for one reason or another maybe don't want to be forced into a breakout room in a new meeting or new space. And I don't know. I
No,
just
I
felt
get that.
empowered to offer that that is a potential that you don't have to go into a breakout room to participate with us
Well,
this
you
evening.
you do have the if you get put into a breakout room and you don't want to be there, you can come back to the main room.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
if
Roger.
that satisfies that request, then that's great. Then we'll do it that way. And we have another person, so I'm going to just for the new arrival, we're doing breakout rooms. and it looks like we have enough for even numbers. And then, and just as Derek pointed out, if you don't want to be in a breakout, you can come back to the main room and wait. Um, but while you're there, the main question is what does it mean to heal through community? What is your feeling about it? What brought you here, and what ideas do you have to share about it? And by speaking to one other person, you may have a better opportunity to express yourself under those circumstances. That's the logic of all this. So let's do this, and then um, we'll come back. Anyone have anything? I guess any reactions or reflections before we go a little further with this?
Well, I got to say what I thought, and remember a lot of group process I've had where I have healing in groups. So community is a group, and you could have healing in community by the fact that sometimes others can help me see things that I can't see that I need to work out. So, or I may be working out something and they can hold my hand until I figure it out. So I think community healing is good because we all seem to have come onto this planet with the idea that we need to heal something. So we end up with something to heal. So
Well, we get a few bumps and scrapes along the way, and
yeah.
we definitely need some help. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any thoughts on their conversation so far?
Derek and I were talking about like curious about the like what the definition of community is, because there are some communities that aren't helpful, and clearly, a beneficial community, a healthy community is like there's different kinds. The other thing that I've had on my mind is I think that community creates an opportunity for healing, but outside of medical healing, like we're all responsible for our own. And so like I'm not sure to say that the community is what does the healing. I'm curious about that. My perspective is that there can be a very nurturing, healthy community that provides the best opportunity, but it's always the person that has to um, ha is responsible for their own, well-being.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because when you think about it, I mean, the body heals itself. All that a medicine does for you is give you the body an opportunity to do that, right? So it's an organic process. It's a process of the body having its healing power enhanced by being in a certain environment. So maybe you could say that about a community too. Um, when I came up with this topic, it wasn't that community was a cure-all necessarily, and also the point was very good that there's all kinds of communities, right? I mean, there's some that are fairly toxic, actually. Is the word community always a positive thing? I guess that's a question. Yes, Ben.
So when Derek says that it's our responsibility for healing, did I get that right?
I guess I don't want to like responsibility can be a tough word, but I think like the kind of healing I think we're talking about, I think has to come from within. And so like somebody else can't heal heal you if you don't want it or if you're not ready for it or something. So I guess that's the point I'm making. But yeah, that's close enough.
Oh, okay. So um, I think from a Christian perspective is that it would be our or my responsibility to make sure that you aren't suffering, right? So it's my responsibility that you are healed, not so much to heal myself, but to heal you, if that's what your need is.
So Finn, does that mean that if if someone, in other words, is it something they're seeking, or is it something you give to them whether they're seeking it or not? I mean, it seems, sensible to say that somebody would be healing, or somebody would seek healing, right? That they would prefer to be healed than to be in pain, let's say. But but at the same time, some people resist having other people help them. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah,
something you have to think
you
about
can't
too, right?
impose that on anybody,
What's that?
and you can't obviously not impose it on anybody. That would be just as wrong as not helping
Right.
them. Yeah,
So yeah, so
but
that's
sometimes,
interesting.
a lot of times, I think people are suffering, and you can't see it on them. They don't give you any signals that they are suffering, so you don't know that they're suffering. That's my problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And also maybe they may think that the condition they're in is just inevitable too. So
Yeah,
that's a possibility.
that there's
You
no
know,
hope.
yeah,
Make sure that
right.
there's no hope.
Well, yeah, but well, let's see what some other people think. Lena, what did you want to say?
Two questions arose. Um, what are we actually healing? Can we pinpoint? And are there different communities that heal different parts of ourselves? And is that the importance of the collective is to form different communities that we can, it's the idea of a movement, movements move. And that's what makes them powerful, right? And I think what makes community powerful is that we can move from community to community and learn and grow and learn new perspectives. That was my first takeaway. What are we healing? And I gave my view, everyone else can give theirs. And another thing is, do we all suffer the same? What is collective suffering versus individual suffering? And which I feel like our collective suffering is where we need to focus within the context of community. And that's what we heal together. To Derek's, and our individual suffering is what we need to be accountable for. So there's both and both. We heal our own individual suffering, and through that, we're coming together. So healing our own and then having conversations around what we've learned and how we've grown, and that helps to heal the collective, and the community's job is to provide the space to have the conversation for the growth of the collective. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to address that?
I've got a thought. I mean, one of the things that, if I can, unless, I think like one of the things that I'd be curious about is, I think a lot of the wounds, you asked what are we healing from? I think a lot of the wounds are things that separate us. And so lack of community is not the cause, but the result of. And so I think I would imagine that being in healthy community is a natural. I've got a cat on my lap and he's starting to possibly throw. I'm sorry. But no, I think that I think that distancing from community and the absence of community is part of the trauma, and that the natural state is community, is at least access to community.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a vitamin deficiency, right? The community is like we don't have enough of that vitamin, then we suffer, we develop problems as a result. But if we have enough of it, then those problems never even arise.
I think that's a good
And
way
I
to put it.
refer to as vitamin L, of course, which is love. which is
Mm.
like the most fundamental of vitamins. Um, so
It's
yeah, I
hard.
think that's a really good point.
It's hard to heal your need for belonging when you don't have any community.
Yeah, that's true. So it takes a community to make a community.
Right. And
Yeah.
so some of our things that we heal from is the lack of community. And
Hmm.
I think the biggest one is when we're right from the beginning, we abandon our true self to adapt to this world that we're in. It's bipolar, that's, dualistic, good and bad. So we come into this world and we whatever we are, we give up to be in the world. That's the problem. So that starts us off, and we start to create all kinds of things from there on. And then at some point, we decide, I better clean up this mess. So that's been my experience.
Do you think that's true in all cultures?
I don't know. I heard that we do get indoctrinated with the message of the people in power to stay in power. So I don't know about it. I only know my own personal experience. It's been one of dominance, and I was taught to take advantage of my position, not to. Um, anyway, I don't know. Um, I've done a lot of healing since then, so I'm happy now. I was talking with in the breakout room about, I kind of find it funny that I'm happy in my life, although a lot of people around me seem to be struggling. So I don't understand all of it. But anyway, thank you for letting me talk. I don't
Oh,
know what I'm
thank.
talking about. I
I
just
well, I always value your wisdom, TC. Thank you.
thank you.
I think the interesting thing is that that it is different for different cultures, and the only reason I can say that is because I've talked to people from different cultures who have a different view of this. And some of us maybe in this room have been exposed to or have lived in the midst of other cultures that are more, cohesive or supportive or just, don't have that terrible sense of separation. Lena?
Um, I just wanted to say it's the difference between collective countries, collectivism and individualism. And yeah, I lived in Sri Lanka. I am just gonna put a little link about the Sarvadoya community. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's the whole island of Sri Lanka is a Gandhian community movement. Like everything about how their government is structured and like how, yeah, that's where I spent 8 years of my life. And it's in all my research, it's one of few remaining true where there is the integrity of um, communion, and it's 90% Buddhist, which I have a lot to say about that. Um, Meaning it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's not, that's not where the peace comes from necessarily, ironically, because the Buddhists were at war with the Muslims, but yeah, I mean, the Gandhian ethics is there's a beauty and a cohesion to Gandhian ethics. And when you have a whole nation run on Gandhian ethics, every government official is a temple owner. It's kind of different, I
Yeah.
will tell you. So I'll
Yeah.
put the link in the chat in case anybody wants to research further.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, from your experience and just knowing the people, of course, it's hard to really know what's going on with anyone, right? But compared to the people that you encountered in this culture, would you say that there's less trauma in a situation in a community like that? The individuals experience maybe not quite as much disconnect in terms of, even their interior, their own integrity. You know what I'm saying?
Um, that's a really complex dive in. All I can say is that the way people handle crisis and the way people come together, they come together in resilience. That's such a good question, and I've written a lot on it. But less trauma, no. A higher ability to deal. I mean, there's, yeah, a higher ability to deal with adverse situations and through coming together in community. The trauma almost ceases to exist only because I do believe that trauma is a very individualistic. There's the same amount of pressure, but more of a resilience. So ultimately, from a psychological perspective, I would say there's less trauma, but there's not even a real language around trauma. So it's just really complicated. You can't use the Western psychology terms such as
Mhm.
trauma to communicate what goes on over there. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
You need a whole new language, which I think is a language that we could learn from in creating our communities as well, Eastern versus Western, dialogue around the human psyche and around or connecting the two, I think is one of the fundamental keys to forming more cohesive communities in Western nations. Pathology is so important. I am not anti-psych in the slightest. I studied it, whatever, but I think finding a way to integrate um, the lessons of the East, like, I think every psychologist, for example, or therapist in America should spend a year in a third world country, basically, or yeah, in order to, as a part of their training, because yeah, it's just hard to communicate because I've written a lot about that, just languaging around this stuff. So we need a new language paradigm shift in our communities around things such as relational trauma, like, but I'm gonna let go. But I think one thing is in America, we have really deep-rooted relational trauma
Hmm.
that doesn't exist like in Sri Lanka.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
guess that was my question, and I think you
yeah.
answered it very well.
So my answer is no, but like, yeah, yeah, I guess I'm still processing myself, but I guess, yeah. The answer is no. And on a very last note, when I came with the perspective, I really struggle finding community in the West, just because of my experiences there too. I'm always
Yeah.
like my relational trauma. I feel so othered from most people because it was so incredible almost there. And I'm not trying to other, but I'm gonna put that link in the chat. That's what I was a part of for 6 years, and I hope you all get a chance to look at it. I'm putting the link for Sarvadoya USA. It does exist here, the Gandhian ethical communities. Ardell, you might have heard of it with your community work or not. But yeah.
No, I'd like to check that out for sure. Thank you. Um, and I guess what really comes to my mind is that everywhere in the world there's pain and suffering of some form. People die, people get sick. You even mentioned, I think when we were speaking before, of some kind of a catastrophe where was it a tsunami or some kind of a where there was a massive amount of damage and death, and yet, there was a different way of coping or a different
Oh
way of
yeah.
healing from it in that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
environment. Yeah.
Tsunami, I witnessed and did work for 6 months. Saw some of the most horrific stuff. Not once was I traumatized. There was nothing but healing in that community, and I was able to withstand so much versus, for example, our American soldiers who come back like because of how the American soldiers are trained. I can attest to community being like the soul and yeah of and grassroots organizations and coming together in intrinsic ways is the way to but you need to build that. It's not something that can happen. That's like generational trauma work. That's like, that's the other thing is that nation was built out of trauma, built out of political
Hmm.
unrest. And I will say on a last note, and then I'll mute, we cannot let go or forget the political. Personal is political, and when we're forming our communities, we have to also like understand that like we are a part of this system. We are both a part and outside of this system, and there is a system there, and it's hurting us. And our togetherness is also a way to resist and that resistance, that love of each other is what's going to keep us safe from, the tyranny of the algorithm, the tyranny of like the big brother that
Yeah.
is now
I,
an abusive father. So yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's the kind of references another session I'm planning later in the week called From Social Isolation to Solidarity, which actually deals with some of the things you're
exactly.
talking about, but we'll leave that till that's actually Friday. But I would like to give Derek a chance at this point to voice his views.
Yeah, no, I was I spent 3 years in the Peace Corps when I was younger, and it was interesting. I was in a small village, and a lot of the existential stuff that Americans go through, that depression, anxiety, like it wasn't really there. And it occurred to me that one of the big differences is that we have so many um, models of how we're supposed to be that are in conflict. And in that community, they didn't really have anything else. So, like, everybody just kind of knew what they were. That's just a hypothesis that came to me, but it was interesting because there wasn't like depression. There wasn't like the moroseness that a lot of people have, especially um, you know, at a certain age, like at a certain age, it was like
Hmm.
really common. So the other thing that I wanted to share, Lena, I can the sense of being an outsider, I think it's natural because I had an experience that was so different from anything that anybody had, that I had a view outside of my culture that other people didn't have. And so I think it just takes time, but it's you feel different because you have a viewpoint that nobody else is familiar with. At least I wasn't. Like the piece of people I came home to just had no way to relate to what I'd experienced, a different way of life. So
So how do we incorporate those people in our communities, the people that have different ways of life, the different cultures, diversity? We don't have to delve into it, but that's another, yeah, like such as myself culturally. And like, that's such an integral part of creating these communities. So thank you, Derek. I feel a little more connected, meaning, yeah, diversity. Inclusion, right?
Yeah. Hmm. It's interesting. My mother used to say she was kind of cynical about a lot of the American identity, and she used to say that America was a nation of misfits. And a lot of it had to do with because of a lot of people. I mean, my great grandparents, all of my great grandparents came from another area, from Europe, and they left communities. Now, in many cases, a lot of those communities were under duress. There was war going on, there were persecutions, there were a lot of economic exploitation, disruptions, all kinds of terrible things were happening throughout the 19th century in Europe, a lot of this, discord. And so a lot of them left thinking they could find a better world. And what happened was they left areas, communities, and honestly, a lot of Europe was already being fragmented throughout the 19th century. A lot of the Industrial Revolution was taking people out of their villages and putting them into factory towns and cities and so forth. But what happened was that they were brought out of places where they were familiar with, cultures they were familiar with, and put into places, this land where they didn't really have anybody they could relate to. And that kind of individualism um, just became the norm. And each succeeding generation seems to me to be a little more affected by that. And so that brings me back to this whole idea of collective trauma. And I know trauma is one of those words you hear a lot these days. And, I try not to use it too much, but it's hard to avoid. But collective trauma is the fact that, once you experience suffering, once you're led into areas in, your emotional reactions or fear, anger, hate, violence in some cases, extreme, cases, um, then you start to affect the people around you, and you actually generate that trauma in other people, and then they generate that trauma to other people or back, and there's a lot of back and forth, and it just, it's kind of creates this kind of cauldron, of trauma. And I think that may be one of the things that's really working against us is the fact that we are in the midst of this, and it doesn't seem like we have a way of really pulling ourselves out of it, or of finding a way to kind of mollify these forces, keep them from doing what they're doing. And there's the danger of each generation, having being a little more alienated from their own nature, or a little more alienated from each other as a result of having to deal with all this. So when we talk about healing through community, it has to be the right kind of community. As I said a little earlier, um, is there a wrong kind, or is there a kind that's actually harmful or toxic? And I'd say, like a lot of businesses, at least those I've worked for, can be very toxic environments because people are pursuing their own goals, and they're kind of, in many cases, are insensitive to the needs of the people around them. So that has a lot to do with it. It's the kind of community, and I think that when we're trying to create a different type of community, one of the reasons that, one of the reasons we have a name for this group is caring. We have to figure out, how do we generate caring? How do we cultivate it? Is there something that we can do individually or together to bring that about, to make that happen in more often and more deeply? What are the things that we need to do to make that happen? I think, if I think one of the things that we need to do is to show up. I think that we can't just give up. And I've been a part of groups that there was a group that I didn't start it, but I came into it, and I took a role as a facilitator. Um, and I've been in that group for 5 years, and it different people have come into it, and they've left. At one point, it was very small. Sometimes it would be just me and one other person. But after about 4 years, it's developed regular people that show up. And there's people that show up every week and they share their experiences, they share their feelings about things. And what's even more important is that they hear from other people. They feel supported there. So there has to be a kind of a sense of something that Finn alluded to a little earlier, um, which is a kind of service. I mean, I think you'd agree with that, right, Finn, that service has to be part of this?
I think, let's see. I've actually done a lot of around this. So yeah, service, absolutely. I think the main thing is when our identification grows beyond ourselves, that's community. And I think that's kind of a natural state of being, but it's not an obligatory, I mean, like people can fall outside of it. But I think that there was a real interesting story about Civil War where the Red Cross nurses would run onto the battlefield to try and help injured soldiers, and a reporter asked somebody like, what is what is wrong with you that you're going to risk your life for a total stranger?" And it was interesting because I could see both sides of it. Like there's an insanity to risking your life for somebody you don't know, and there's an insanity of not. And so it's interesting to feel kind of both sides, that when you feel that connection, you have to help people. And when you don't feel that connection, it's insane to help somebody. And the duality of that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation because what I see in that is it's a question of what your identity is, and I think that you were alluding to that.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that the communities, that's why community is so important, whether it's family or your neighborhood or I think it's natural for us to feel like we're part of multiple things. But I think that's where like work gets really weird because our work community, where I'm not working because I like it, I'm working because of the money, I'm working because of whatever.
right, right.
And so you lose that ability to actually bond and feel a part of.
Yeah, that's very true. You don't, but I think the other part of it too, which is interesting, is that you feel that you know that the community is nourishing you. You know that the community is making it possible for you to survive. And whether, I mean, on some level you have to be aware of that. You can't survive without it. I mean, you could if you're one of these survivalists and somebody drops you from an airplane, 100, 200 miles from anywhere, and you have to find your way to survive. But the fact is that we are extremely dependent on our environment, our community, our neighbors, or the people that are part of our society. And um, I think that when we realize that, then we realize that whatever benefits the person next to me actually ultimately benefits me. And likewise, that any harm that comes to someone is actually going to harm me in some way. Um, And I think that that's along the lines of what you're saying. I mean, if in a work environment, people are just working for themselves, they can collect money and then they have the money and then they can go off. If they make enough money, then they don't really have that sense of connection anymore because they can buy anything they need. But if they understand that the person next to them is also a part of their life and is and the things that happen to that person are going to affect everyone and including me, I'm going to be affected by it. Um, and
I
that's
think
key.
that's a realization that a lot of people have, but it's also a perspective that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, and like I think it's a healthier perspective, but it's also like I think it would be a mistake to assume it or to think that it's because for a lot of people it is irrational to think that way
Yeah.
from their
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
I think it depends is my another question. I like posing questions for people to think about. Is family, like your blood family, is that your first sense and connection to community when you're born? And does your family define how you view community? I was just thinking about that because I was blessed to grow up with my parents who allowed me to have a really beautiful, juicy perspective. So yeah, is family the first? Like how does family affect our view of community?
Yeah, that's a really good question, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact, because
Generation, and that ties into generational trauma and like
yeah,
all of these things, and then how we bring that to the table, right? And into our so a micro community. Does family shape our ideas and that goes back to nature versus nurture. Oh my God, that's a fundamentally powerful question when it
oh
comes to
yeah.
community. I don't know.
No, no, I think that's a great question. I love that because it's actually introduced to something that's really meaningful to me. Um, the family unit,
Yeah.
okay, and the actual the pathology of the nuclear family, for instance, the fact that the nuclear family creates a boundary around the family that keeps the members of that family from really fully being part of a broader community. Because,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. Other people may have different experience, but I grew up in a family that saw itself as being distinct from the community at large. And the fact that you can have, and the very concept of a nuclear family, a modular family, you could call it, that could be taken out of one place and plugged into another, which is what happened to me when I was a child. My father made more money, so we got another house and we moved out of one place where I had friends into a place where I had to make new friends. And some people would say, well, that's a lesson of life, that's something that teaches you how to be resilient and builds character and all that. But the fact is that it's losing friends. I mean, that's something that, again, I mean, we can't really compare ourselves too much to the traditional village, but traditional villages were fairly stable unless there was some kind of traumatic thing that took place that destroyed it as a village.
Yeah.
And the people would stay there and live there all their lives. They wouldn't be moving or to another place because they wanted a bigger house.
I got kicked out of my village because I brought a boy to the village. In Sri Lanka, I
Right.
literally was living in this village and they considered me a local. And I brought my friend, not even realizing someone I was working with home. And they're like, because supposedly I was already promised to one of the boys in the village. And I had no idea of these dynamics, but like, and I got shunned out of the community and called blasphemous because I literally brought an outcast man that I wasn't like into the community to have tea. That's how hardcore, like strict. Yeah, and um there's nuclear family though. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with that level,
Yeah.
but it's the family structure that creates the pockets of families that create little cells that create community. So there's no individual though in Sri Lanka, and is that a good thing? Should we
Yeah.
keep at least a little bit of our individualism and not create totalitarian family like yeah like
No,
but
that's a good point because I've heard said of the Amish community that they
oh
um that they're very patriarchal and that they also, will shun people. And so, it seems very cohesive. They've got the barn raisings. It sounds like a really nice kind of situation, but there's a lot of things that are going on below the surface there that kind of undermine that beautiful vision. But when I was thinking about the nuclear family, I was thinking also about birth order and how that can impact people. Now, if you're part of a larger community, birth order probably isn't as significant because all the other children in that community are basically a part of an extended family. So even the youngest child is going to be a baby, and the oldest child is going to be, almost entering adulthood within that. If you have that view of an extended family. But when you have nuclear families, you can have an oldest child and a youngest child, and the dynamics of that relationship, change as they grow older. And I can tell you from my own experience, and um, that having much older siblings put me in a situation where I would feel not as confident about myself, feeling like there was, that I didn't have the same degree of competence or ability to deal with the world as my older siblings who were so much smarter, just because they were older, just because they've been around longer. I think that can cause a certain disruption in the way that we view ourselves. But again, the extended family is one that is much richer in terms of having children able to really see other adults and develop other kinds of quote role models, right? Having people who may see the world differently. But when you have two parents, and if there's any kind of a problem with your parents in terms of their relationship or maybe some kind of a emotional problem, what have you, then that's going to have more of an impact on a child if they're the only adults that those children are really exposed to. So there's another avenue of trauma right there. Um, so again, when we talk about this, it's almost as if, well, there's a more normal state. As much as I dislike the word normal, but there's a state that's more akin to our nature, that's more natural. And when we move away from that state, that's when that's when we experience suffering and trauma. So it's a question of not so much healing again as maybe dealing with the deficiency, just as I said earlier, as a vitamin deficiency. And the community is restoring health by overcoming that deficiency, by providing us with the nourishment that we need.
You said something that just got me wondering. I I'm not sure if you didn't say this, but it gave me the impression that like trauma, we're healthy and then trauma happens and we need to kind of back up to when we were healthy. And you didn't say that, but it kind of led to that impression. And I think like trauma is like unnecessary trauma. You don't wish that on anybody, but I think that trauma, like a lot of times, trauma is just a part of life,
Yeah.
and it's a growth opportunity. And so, like to me, there's something beautiful on the other side of trauma, and so it's part of a process. And like backing up to when there wasn't trauma isn't the ideal. And
Well, yeah,
he didn't say that, but that it made me think of that, so I wanted to share.
no, that's a very good point, and I think that's why I said a little earlier. I think that there is no life without it. You know, I mean, we're just being born is traumatic in a sense, right? Just suddenly going through that process can, we don't remember it, I guess, which is probably a good thing, but no, I mean, we encounter all kinds of things through our lives that are, and we can't say, we can't eliminate them. And the idea that you also suggested, I think, is that sometimes challenges do enable us to grow. In fact, there are some people that would say that the whole process of evolution was one of meeting challenges and expanding abilities, of course, over generations through natural selection, if you subscribe to that. Um, but the point is that it is it is those obstacles that strengthen or create new abilities in some cases. But I also think it's important that um, we have to have the support, or we have to have the wherewithal to deal with it. In other words, it's like if you're in a village and people aren't getting fed enough, they're not receiving enough food, and some kind of a plague goes through or some kind of an illness goes into the village, they're not going to be able to withstand it as well as those who are well fed, or are healthy in other respects. So it's not so much that you eliminate trauma or avoid it completely, but you have a kind of emotional health that allows you to deal with it better and to recover from it. And maybe even, as you say, um, overcome it in a way that gives you a kind of an added strength. If that's, am I understanding you, in that sense? I mean, does that
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I don't know. It's not. In this moment, I'm not feeling like I need community,
okay?
and it's not that I prefer an absence of community, but I do feel like I can create what I need. Like I'm here and I feel comfortable, and I don't hardly know any of you, but like so I think that there's a it's interesting to I'm appreciating this conversation because I hadn't thought of things this way. But I think that when you're healthy, you're not in the trauma of loneliness. You're not in the trauma of insecurity. You're not in the trauma of all these things. And so, being present with whoever you're present with, you can be in community wherever you are without having a defined community.
Yeah, I see your point. And I think what you're saying is that if you're emotionally healthy, you can move into different spheres and relate to people. But where does that emotional health come from? I mean, what is the source of it? That's a good question, I think, isn't it? The initial
So,
health that you have.
well, and like I don't know, like I don't want to do, but that makes me think kind of like some of the thought where often it's been said or I've heard where we need to love each other before ourselves before we can love others or before others can love us. So we get kind of into the horse before the cart or the chicken before the egg kind of. But as we've been talking, one of the things that's been striking me, we've been fortunate enough to find a queer center here in our local community that we've been spending a lot of time at. And I don't know if all of you were aware, but the current political state in the United States is very upheaval around the transgendered and queer communities. There's a lot of things and shifts and stuff happening, whatever your belief or wherever you're at on the side of the aisle. And as a queer member of the community, having a place where I can go and hold space and where I can be safe and I can be honored and I can be respected and I can be on an equal playing field with people and we can hold conversation so I can hold space for people that are having experiences that aren't mine just because we have that camaraderie and we have that space in that container. So some of these are holding containers that are chosen containers that aren't assigned containers that we get to come to and hold commune together and chosen commune, be it whether we choose to come with our families that we were assigned at birth, be it that we come however we come, that they're containers that we're allowed to choose into and not forced into.
Yeah, well, you see, that is the kind of that's a situation where those containers or that community that you have is actually a source of your strength and your health, that helps
It,
you deal with the
well, and it becomes
assault.
more than me too, right? Because it
Right.
allows me to show up powerfully and hold space for others that maybe
Mhm.
aren't able to for one reason or another, or that I'm allowed to bring voice and hold safety to where people that maybe normally don't have a voice to speak or feel safe to speak can speak.
Right. And that's very important. And that's what keeps people emotionally healthy, so that even when they have to encounter the trauma of the attacks that are coming from without, they're able to weather that storm better without it turning, without it damaging them so much that it's going to just totally obliterate their ability to deal with the world. So you're creating a space that allows people to maintain their emotional health because of that mutual support. And that's I guess that kind of embodies some of the ideas that I have about how you attain healing through community. It's not just healing, but it's also maintaining health. And that maintaining of health is a process of providing that space. And I think that that's really a very important thing to hold on to. Um, and I think that, you know, when and you're both Derek, so I'm going to refer to the other Derek, whichever direction I'm pointing at this point. When you said that you didn't feel you needed community, maybe you have a measure of emotional health through your experiences in life that has given you the ability uh, to form community where you go. I mean, is that a possibility? Do you think that, in other words, if you have a kind of a personality or you have an outlook so that when you encounter people, you're able to bond with them to an extent that you can you can create that space where you are? Do you think does that
Yeah,
sound
I'm
valid?
deliberate about it. Yeah. And you asked before, I think like the you asked about what would help with creating a sense of kindness. I think like the attitude of being welcoming
Mm,
is, I mean, there's a way to do that. And I try. I mean, but I mean I can dance, and I mean I can absolutely lead people. I can absolutely, but I can also, there are times when, I'm outside of that that space, and can be very comfortable anywhere, very, very comfortable by myself. And there isn't a sense of needing some, other a space, or needing to be around certain people. Um, but again, it's like it's a dance. It's not like that's like my perpetual state. But I mean, I've done a lot of work, a lot of
well,
lot of
that's the key,
involved.
I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
You develop, and I it's not the best analogy, but I've used it before, which is a kind of an emotional muscle or whatever you want to call it, just a reserve of confidence, strength, a feeling of attuneness. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to describe it, I guess, but just the fact that you've reached the attitude. I mean, there's some times when I can go into different spaces, and as a matter of fact, I have to tell you that I'm not really a member of one community at this point. That I'm a kind of a nomad when it comes to communities. I move from one community to the next, and I don't really have a home in that sense. But at the same time, this space here tonight, is a micro community, so to speak, right? I mean, we're here, we're talking, we're sharing our views, and we're respectful of each other. We're respectful of our different diverse opinions and such. And I think that this is the kind of thing that, again, I'm not giving up. I'm not trying to plug that what we do every week, but we try to do that every week. Finn is a regular. Finn's been coming for quite a while. TC's become a regular. Um, and anyone, is welcome to come in. It's a small group. It's not huge, but it's a welcoming group. And it's one of the things that that I like to work towards. I have another group as that meets Wednesdays. It's a larger group. It's usually about 12 to 15 people that show up for that. It's structured a little differently, but it's a very comforting thing to have that. So you get community wherever you can find it, right? It's one of those things that you try to, you do the best you can. And if you have that opportunity, it's a wonderful thing. It really is. It's not always easy to find, but
And I'm working to build community as well. I'm very actively working to build it. So
in what like locally and where you live or
I I I I I work with a lot of spiritually and energetic people, and so I'm building a kind of partially professional, partially community space for mystically minded people, and connecting with, not everybody's of that perspective, but I'm gathering the ones that I can find, and a lot of people are like, there's a lot of exhaustion in the world because so many people feel like they have to do everything on their own.
mm,
That's a state of mind that is really pervasive, and community alleviates that. I think it's not an accurate state of mind, but if you feel it, you feel it, and it's true for you, But um, no, I think, yeah. So anyway, that's I mean, um, yeah. I think our natural state is to be connected and engaged and contributing and being contributed to, and but it's actually really rare in the world right now.
May I ask you
yeah.
where you're creating this community?
Yeah, if I can, yeah, findmagicpeople.com is a space that I'm creating, and then I'm working to do different types of activities, and creating a space for people that are mystically minded. That is, a lot of people still feel like it's weird, woo, it's crazy, and so it's a lot of people don't feel like how they feel is accepted. And I think that it's actually far more mainstream than people see it as, but that's what I'm building.
Can you put your link in the chat?
Mhm.
Yeah, please do. As a matter of fact, the website that I have, I'd like to put links to groups that are working towards this. I'm trying to collect as many as I can at this point. So if you don't mind, I would like to include yours in that group.
Mhm.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can,
Okay, good.
yeah, if you want to, I mean, I'd be happy I'd be curious to hear about I mean, this is actually my first event with Limicon this year, so
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Um,
I'd be happy to stay in touch and hear about what you're doing.
yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll put the link to our meeting, okay? Which is
Mhm.
takes place every week here. It's the same address, but I'm going to put the address in there too, just in case. Now, if you come to the website, you'll be able to actually find the address there. So rather than have you try to get the link, um, what you can do is just go to the website and then it has a link, and you can also has a little button where you can add it to your calendar. I find that sometimes people they forget about these things very easily. So, Lena, I see your hand is up.
Could community be, I think what we lack, I just thought of this too. I left the conversation for a minute. Sorry, guys. Um, Short attention span, cats and laundry. Oh my gosh, life. It's all part of community. Taking care of the chores. I'm notoriously bad. But one day I'm 45 years old today, and I swear one day I will
Oh,
be
happy
a grown
birthday.
up. One day I will be a grown up.
My
I
birthday
promise.
too.
The
Today's your
day I
birthday?
die,
Today?
I will actually grow up. Just um No, I was gonna, that's like my vow to stay childlike forever. And finally I'll be like, oh my God, I have to grow up.
Well,
Um,
I hope you don't grow up,
You
Lena,
don't
because I
have
love you the
to.
way you are.
Thanks, guys. Validation. Um,
Yeah.
no, exactly. I was gonna say that community is also a process, not like the individuals. And I think sometimes we look at community as the individuals in the community, and we forget that community in itself is like, how we have the collective consciousness, this floating orb. Community is something, it's actually a really abstract concept. And that's what we have to realize is the concept itself is, yeah, is a complicated processing, like weaving, um, a beautiful woven entity that exists somewhere, and we bring it down, and through our connections, we realize community, we make it happen. It's not stagnant. And
No.
and also community could just be one person and another person giving meaning, helping to see each other as mirrors and giving meaning and hope to each other. That to me is community. And on a very last note, the animals. We didn't even mention the cats and the dogs and the sheep and the pigs and all the animals once in our talk about communities. So had to bring them in.
Well, they appreciate that. They need they need a spokesperson for sure. So,
That is me forever. Thank you, Roger, for this beautiful session. I'm off for my nightly. I'm gonna go disappear into the woods with my bike and a couple of friends tonight. So,
oh, that sounds nice, especially and happy birthday. I just want to say that before you leave. So I'm pleased that you spent your birthday with us.
yeah, birthdays. Um, really quickly before I go, Alex, we haven't heard your voice, and I was just curious, like,
Yeah, no, just dropping in and listening. Didn't really have something to contribute. It's been an interesting discussion. Yeah, healing through community. I think it's important. I think the loneliness epidemic is also something that's very real, especially in the United
Mhm.
States. I come from Latin cultures, and I lived in Europe, and so it's a little bit different than here. I find it
Yeah.
very individualistic here. I've been here for, a long time, over 20 years. I live in Miami, but it's very individualistic and
Oh, so much.
I'm much more used to like closer, like there's like a feel. My father, when he passed away, he was 91 and he wanted to spend his last years in Brazil precisely because in the grocery store no one recognized him here, in the local grocery store. The cashiers would never even say hi to him, even though he was a 90-year-old man. He said, "There's not that many of me around. You'd think the cashier would like be concerned about me, and they don't care." So I want to go to Brazil, where any store I go into, people are really tender, and that stayed with me.
I
And I'm wondering why is it that in the United States people are not tender? My experience is in the Midwest, people are more tender, but in Miami, it's not the case.
Yeah, a lot of time the urban areas people seem to be very estranged from each other. And I mean, we can take another hour for that. But,
well,
it's interesting. I just wanted to make a observation that I remember going to this, while I was working, I used to go to this pizza place every week. And they would see me coming and they would have my pizza ready for me. But they were from Italy, and so that was part of their culture, and I'm sure that there are plenty of Americans, native born Americans that have that too. But these guys were amazing because they say, "Oh, we saw you walking from the parking lot, so we had your pizza all ready for you," because they just get a slice of pizza for me. But it was special, to know that somebody recognized you. And it's like that old TV show where everybody knows your name, right?
Mhm.
That's important. It really is. It makes you feel like you exist, right?
I
But
think
thanks for go ahead, Lena.
I think America was like that once. It just like a lot has been, the climate's been shifting so drastically. And I think I always make the anecdote that there's the idea of Big Brother, and watching over you in America, right? And how Big Brother grew up and he became an abusive dad because he was so severely neglected, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we look at the system here as bad and horrible, and I'm like, there's a part to that. Is it evil? No. What we need to realize is the people in power have been just as neglected and abused as we have, and that it's all abuse cycle. The
Mhm.
colonization and all of these systems have affected everyone, and the people in power, they're freaking, it's a generational, like, we have instilled violence and aggression into into the culture colonization, so like, how do we deprogram that to create communities that actually heal? Because Alex, like, yeah, America, when we have that perspective, like, it's just like, oh, I don't know if you were here. I don't think you were. I talked a bit about my time in Sri Lanka and we were discussing that. So thank you for bringing
Mhm.
in Brazil as well. We should
Mhm.
make a map of all the cultures, like the warm zones, and create like from red all the way to gray, and create which are the, it would be a great study, for sure.
Yeah.
America honestly would fall somewhere like in the middle, though. That's what's crazy because there are countries that are colder and more individualistic, or at least I hope that there would be. I mean, I know there are. So, I gotta run, but thank you all. Roger, you're such an incredible, kind, and beautiful soul. So,
Well, I
I
think you're incredible too, and kind and
will.
sensitive and all that good stuff.
I'll
So,
see you soon.
okay, we'll see you. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
So, yeah, we have a lot of work to do here.
I shared a link to the Compassion Project. Uh,
Yeah, thank you.
it's a really beautiful exercise, and the Avatar Network had a goal to get 1 million cards into the world, and I think we're close to 10 million now.
Well,
On that link, there's a video where you can get guided through the exercise, and it's a real magical exercise. So if feel free to check it out.
well, thanks for sharing that. And maybe you'll come back to visit us because we're here every week, every Tuesday. So,
Okay, yeah,
be
sounds good.
glad to see you again.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And Alex, I saw you. We met last year. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, and thank you so much, Roger, for the session. I'll see
Well,
you.
thanks for being here and thanks for sharing your perspective too, Alex. So.